What if the stars you thought you knew were living a completely different truth behind the spotlight? In 9 Hollywood stars who changed their gender and left the world. Speechless, 2026. We uncover the transformations that shook the entertainment industry to its core. From career-defining announcements to bold new identities that rewrote their legacies, these celebrities didn't just transition, they stunned the world. Fame hid the whispers, headlines amplified the shock, and now we reveal how everything changed. Laverne Cox. Some stars are manufactured by studios. Others are forged in resistance. Laverne Cox belongs to the latter. Born in Mobile, Alabama, she grew up in the Deep South at a time and in a place where difference often drew scrutiny instead of celebration. As a child who would later identify as transgender, she has spoken about isolation, bullying, and the quiet ache of feeling misaligned with the expectations placed upon her. Before Hollywood knew her name, she was already navigating a world that questioned her existence, learning resilience long before recognition. Education and performance became her refuge. Theater offered structure, storytelling offered control. In classrooms and rehearsal spaces, Laverne refined not only her craft, but her sense of purpose. She understood that visibility could be more than personal affirmation. It could become social intervention. Yet the entertainment industry she was preparing to enter had rarely made room for openly transgender women in complex roles. The barriers were real, but so was her determination. That determination crystallized when she was cast as Sophia Bursay in Netflix's groundbreaking series Orange is the New Black. Sophia was a transgender woman navigating incarceration, motherhood, and survival with intelligence and emotional depth. Through Laverne's performance, the character transcended stereotype. She was not presented as spectacle or cautionary tale, but as human, layered, flawed, compassionate. Audiences who had never before encountered a nuanced portrayal of a transgender woman were suddenly confronted with one in prime time. In 2014, Laverne Cox became the first openly transgender person nominated for a Primetime Emmy Award in an acting category. The milestone carried symbolic weight far beyond a single performance. It marked a visible crack in an industry long criticized for exclusion. That same year, her appearance on the cover of Time magazine under the headline, "The Transgender Tipping Point," captured a cultural shift already underway. The image traveled globally, positioning her not only as an actress, but as a figure emblematic of broader social change. Yet Laverne's influence did not rest on accolades. She consistently used her platform to address healthcare discrimination, employment inequality, and the disproportionate violence faced by transgender women, particularly women of color. In interviews and speeches, she blended personal narrative with policy awareness, transforming celebrity into advocacy. Her message remained clear: representation is not a trend, but a necessity tied to dignity and safety. Laverne Cox's journey illustrates how authenticity can reshape institutions. From a childhood marked by misunderstanding to international recognition and cultural leadership, her trajectory reflects endurance anchored in purpose. She did not dilute her identity to fit the industry. She expanded the industry's capacity to recognize her. Through talent, visibility, and unwavering commitment to truth, she helped move conversations once confined to the margins into the center of mainstream discourse, proving that when courage meets opportunity, culture itself begins to evolve. Caitlyn Jenner. In the blazing summer of 1976, beneath the roaring sky of Montreal's Olympic Stadium, Bruce Jenner stood crowned in gold, the ultimate American champion. The decathlon victory was more than a medal, it was mythology in motion. He was strength carved into flesh discipline, wrapped in red, white, and blue, a face that appeared on cereal boxes and television screens as the embodiment of masculine triumph. At a time when the United States was searching for heroes, Bruce Jenner felt like certainty itself, unshakable, invincible, and perfectly aligned with the image the nation wanted to see. But legends often demand silence in exchange for applause. Behind the polished interviews and endorsement deals, there was, by Caitlyn's later account, a private reality unfolding in the shadows. In her memoir, The Secrets of My Life, she described a lifelong internal struggle, a quiet and persistent truth that never dissolved under stadium lights. While the public celebrated the triumph of a male athletic icon, she has said she was wrestling internally with an identity that did not match the role she was living. It was a double existence shaped by expectation and restraint, where global fame stood in sharp contrast to a deeply personal conflict that could not easily be spoken in the era that made her famous. For decades, the world continued to see the image it had always known. Bruce Jenner evolved into a familiar presence in American pop culture, eventually entering reality television and expanding his celebrity far beyond sports. Yet the tension between public persona and private truth, as she later revealed, never fully disappeared. It lingered beneath interviews, behind smiles, inside carefully constructed appearances that functioned like armor. Then in 2015, nearly 40 years after the gold medal that defined a generation, the silence gave way to revelation. In a nationally televised interview with Diane Sawyer, Caitlyn Jenner publicly came out as transgender, a moment that reverberated far beyond entertainment headlines. The announcement marked not only a personal declaration but also a cultural shift, forcing mainstream America to confront conversations about authenticity, identity, and the hidden cost of living unseen. Soon after the docuseries I Am Kate opened a window into her daily life, portraying transition not as spectacle, but as a journey marked by vulnerability, uncertainty, and resolve. Caitlyn Jenner's story became one of reinvention, not in pursuit of fame, but in pursuit of honesty. The Olympic champion, who once symbolized physical endurance, revealed another form of strength, one measured not in seconds or points, but in the willingness to step into the light after decades in shadow. Her transformation reframed her legacy, suggesting that the most profound victories are not always won before roaring crowds, but in the quiet, difficult decision to finally live without disguise. After Caitlyn Jenner's journey, was her greatest win Olympic gold or living her truth? Comment 1 for truth, comment 0 for gold. Andreja Pejic. There are moments in fashion history when a single face disrupts decades of certainty. Andreja Pejic was one of those moments. Born in Tuzla, Bosnia in 1991, her earliest years were shaped not by glamour but by conflict. As war fractured her homeland, her family fled, eventually rebuilding their lives in Australia. The runway was not destiny written at birth. It was a distant possibility emerging from displacement, resilience, and reinvention. Long before couture houses would compete for her presence, survival itself was the first chapter of her story. By her late teens, Andreja possessed a look the industry could not categorize. Delicate yet angular, soft yet striking, she moved through castings with an aura that unsettled traditional definitions. In 2011, she achieved what few models had dared to attempt at the highest level, walking major runways in both menswear and womenswear collections. One night, she embodied sharp, tailored masculinity. The next, she floated through gowns designed to celebrate femininity. The effect was electric. Editors debated. Designers recalibrated. Audiences stared, sensing that something fundamental in fashion's rigid binary had just shifted. At the time, mainstream conversations about gender fluidity were still limited. Yet Andreja's presence on international magazine covers and in global campaigns quietly challenged the architecture of beauty itself. She was frequently described as androgynous, a word that both captured and confined her. The industry celebrated the aesthetic ambiguity, but beneath the surface, her personal journey toward clarity continued. Public fascination grew, yet the deeper truth remained hers to define. In 2014, Andreja publicly came out as a transgender woman, marking a profound turning point. The announcement reframed the narrative that had surrounded her rise. What had once been marketed as mystery became authenticity. She spoke about identity with composure, emphasizing that her evolution was not a trend but a reality long understood internally. The following year, she made history again as the first openly transgender model to front a major cosmetics campaign with Makeup Forever. The symbolism resonated globally. A transgender woman representing a beauty brand at the highest commercial level signaled more than inclusion, it suggested transformation. Despite the polished editorials and high fashion acclaim, Andreja has acknowledged the vulnerability inherent in living openly within an industry that commodifies image. Her journey illustrates the tension between being celebrated for difference and being fully understood. Yet she continued forward, building a career that balanced modeling with advocacy and public conversation about identity and acceptance. Andreja Pejic did more than walk runways. She altered the lens through which fashion views gender. From refugee child to international model, from ambiguity to self-defined womanhood, her trajectory embodies reinvention without erasure. In a world that once relied on strict categories, she stood as living proof that beauty evolves, expands, and ultimately belongs to those bold enough to claim it openly. Janet Mock. Before the publishing deals, before Hollywood contracts and standing ovations, there was a young girl in Hawaii searching for language to describe herself in a world that rarely offered it. Janet Mock grew up navigating poverty, instability, and the quiet ache of feeling unseen. As a transgender girl of color, she has spoken about wrestling with belonging from an early age, moving through adolescence with both fierce determination and fragile hope. The world around her often misunderstood what it refused to understand, and yet she refused to let those limitations script her future. Transitioning during her teenage years required courage long before cameras or headlines ever appeared. Education became her pathway forward, storytelling her instrument of survival. Janet understood something powerful. If society distorted transgender lives, then the most radical act was to tell the story herself. In 2014, she released her memoir, Redefining Realness, a book that did more than recount personal milestones. It exposed vulnerability, poverty, ambition, and identity with unflinching honesty. The memoir resonated far beyond literary circles, becoming a cultural touchstone for readers who had rarely encountered such openness from a transgender woman of color. But Janet's influence did not stop on the printed page. She moved into television with the same strategic clarity that defined her writing. As a writer, director, and executive producer on the acclaimed series Pose, she helped center Black and Latinx transgender communities within mainstream storytelling. Set against the vibrant yet often overlooked ballroom culture of 1980s New York, the show did not reduce its characters to symbols. It honored them as dreamers, lovers, survivors. Janet made history as the first transgender woman of color hired as a writer for a major television series, quietly redrawing the boundaries of who gets to shape narratives in Hollywood. In 2019, she broke another barrier by signing an overall deal with Netflix, becoming the first trans woman of color to secure such an agreement. The milestone signaled more than career advancement. It marked institutional recognition of a voice once pushed to the margins. Through interviews and public appearances, Janet has consistently emphasized that representation without authorship is incomplete. Visibility matters, but control over the narrative transforms culture. Janet Mock's journey is not framed by scandal or spectacle. It is defined by authorship intention and an unwavering belief that truth, when spoken clearly, can dismantle silence. She did not wait to be interpreted by others. She wrote herself into history, ensuring that stories once ignored would be documented with dignity and depth. In an industry built on scripted illusions, Janet chose authenticity as her most powerful plot twist, proving that when marginalized voices seize the pen, the story of an entire era can begin to change. If Janet Mock's journey inspired you, hit like, subscribe, and stay with us as we uncover the stories Hollywood never told. Michaela J. Rodriguez Long. Before history attached itself to her name, there was a young artist in Newark who understood that the stage could become a sanctuary. Michaela J. Rodriguez did not stumble into performance. She gravitated toward it with intention, as if music and theater were the only places where her full self could breathe without hesitation. While the world outside negotiated categories and expectations, she immersed herself in craft training in musical theater and refining a voice that carried both strength and vulnerability in equal measure. Her early appearance in the off-Broadway production of Rent signaled more than talent. It revealed emotional fluency, a performer capable of translating personal depth into universal resonance. After publicly coming out as a transgender woman, MJ continued forward with disciplined focus, aware that Hollywood had rarely imagined someone like her at the center of a dramatic narrative. The industry's limitations were clear, but so was her resolve. That turning point arrived with the FX series Pose, a show that illuminated New York's 1980s ballroom culture and placed transgender women of color at the heart of its storytelling. Cast as Blanca Rodriguez Evangelista, MJ embodied a character defined not by tragedy, but by leadership and compassion. Blanca was a house mother, a mentor, a woman forging family from fragments. Through subtle gestures and emotionally grounded performances, MJ infused the role with dignity that felt lived in rather than performed. Viewers were not asked to observe her from a distance. They were invited to understand her. Recognition followed with historic weight. In 2021, MJ Rodriguez became the first transgender woman nominated for a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Drama Series. The nomination alone marked a rupture in long-standing industry norms. In 2022, she advanced that milestone by winning the Golden Globe for Best Actress in a Television Drama, becoming the first transgender actress to claim the honor. The achievement resonated beyond personal success, signaling that excellence could no longer be separated from inclusion. Outside of award ceremonies, MJ has continued shaping culture through music, public speaking, and advocacy. She emphasizes opportunity over tokenism and authenticity over spectacle, reminding audiences that representation must extend beyond visibility into meaningful participation. Her career illustrates a quiet but powerful shift talent meeting readiness at the precise moment culture begins to evolve. MJ Rodriguez did not alter Hollywood through provocation. She did so through artistry executed with precision and heart. By inhabiting her roles fully and living her truth openly, she expanded what leading lady presence can look like. In doing so, she reframed not only her own narrative but the expectations of an industry learning perhaps slowly to see more clearly. Gigi Gorgeous. In the early days of YouTube, when the platform still felt like a digital diary rather than a global empire, a charismatic teenager from Montreal began speaking directly into a camera. The lighting was simple, the backdrop unremarkable, but the personality was magnetic. Gigi Gorgeous entered the online world with glamour humor and a fascination with beauty culture. Viewers initially came for makeup tutorials and fashion commentary. Yet as subscriber counts climbed into the millions, the channel began to shift in tone. Behind the lip gloss and styling tips, a deeper narrative was forming. In 2013, Gigi publicly shared that she was transitioning. The announcement did not arrive wrapped in corporate polish. It unfolded in real time through emotional uploads that captured uncertainty, relief, fear, and determination. Unlike traditional celebrities whose transformations are filtered through press releases, Gigi allowed her audience to witness vulnerability without a buffer. The response was immediate and global. Support poured in alongside curiosity and misunderstanding. But what distinguished Gigi's journey was her refusal to retreat. She continued documenting medical milestones, personal reflections, and evolving self-confidence, turning what could have been a private evolution into a shared narrative of resilience. Her platform transformed from lifestyle entertainment into a living archive of identity in motion. In 2017, her story expanded beyond the confines of a laptop screen with the documentary This Is Everything, Gigi Gorgeous, directed by Academy Award-winning filmmaker Barbara Cowell. The film revealed the layered reality of online fame where public adoration and personal growth coexist under constant visibility. It portrayed not only the glamour of influence but the emotional complexity of becoming oneself while millions watch. Outside the digital sphere, Gigi embraced advocacy with increasing clarity. She spoke about transgender rights inclusion and the importance of self-determination in interviews and public appearances. Her 2019 marriage to designer and activist Nats Getty symbolized another chapter, one rooted in partnership and public affirmation rather than secrecy. It marked a shift from internet personality to fully realized public figure. Gigi Gorgeous did not emerge from Hollywood casting calls or television auditions. She built her influence from a bedroom camera and unfiltered honesty. By choosing transparency over concealment, she demonstrated that authenticity can flourish even in the most exposed environments. Her journey reflects a new kind of stardom, one where transformation is not hidden behind studio doors but shared openly, frame by frame, with the world watching. Indya Moore. Not every star rises from comfort. Some are forged in instability, sharpened by rejection, and propelled forward by sheer will. Indya Moore's story begins in the Bronx, New York, where early life was marked by tension and misunderstanding. As a transgender and non-binary youth, Indya has spoken about feeling out of place in environments that struggled to accept difference. By the age of 14, they left home navigating periods of homelessness while still trying to hold on to fragments of ambition. Survival was not abstract. It was daily, immediate, and unforgiving. Modeling became both refuge and resistance. What began as a means of sustaining themselves gradually transformed into a pathway toward visibility. Designers noticed Indya's striking presence, a blend of softness and strength that defied easy categorization. Runways that once seemed unreachable opened, and fashion houses began to recognize a face that carried not just beauty but narrative. Each appearance challenged assumptions about who belonged in high fashion and who did not. The defining shift arrived with the FX series Pose, a drama centered on New York's ballroom culture of the 1980s and 1990s. Cast as Angel Evangelista, a young transgender woman navigating love, ambition, and survival, Indya delivered a performance layered with vulnerability and quiet resolve. Angel was not reduced to stereotype. She was allowed complexity, desire, heartbreak, and hope. Through subtle expression and emotional nuance, Indya brought humanity to a character who reflected real histories long overlooked by mainstream media. Recognition followed with symbolic weight. In 2019, Indya Moore was named to Time magazine's list of the 100 most influential people, a milestone that signaled cultural acknowledgement beyond entertainment circles. That same year, they made history as the first openly transgender and non-binary person to model for a Louis Vuitton campaign. The imagery resonated globally, suggesting a fashion industry gradually confronting its own limitations. Yet influence for Indya has never been confined to aesthetics. They have consistently used their platform to address systemic inequality, healthcare discrimination, and the urgent need to protect transgender and non-binary communities. Public statements and interviews carry a tone of urgency shaped by lived experience rather than theory. Advocacy is not performance, it is continuity. Indya Moore's journey illustrates how visibility can evolve into agency. From instability in adolescence to international campaigns and critical acclaim, the trajectory reflects resilience anchored in authenticity. In every role, every photograph, and every public stance, Indya reinforces a central truth: representation becomes transformative when it is rooted in lived reality rather than surface inclusion. Simon Cowell. For decades, Simon Cowell has been the sharp silhouette behind the judge's table, the man whose raised eyebrow could launch or end a career in seconds. As the driving force behind global franchises like The X Factor and America's Got Talent, he built a reputation on precision, blunt honesty, and an almost surgical instinct for talent. His image was unmistakable: tailored shirts, controlled smirk, the embodiment of entertainment authority in its most polished form. But in recent years, it was not a critique of a contestant that captured headlines. It was his own reflection. Viewers began noticing dramatic changes in his appearance, prompting widespread speculation about cosmetic procedures. The conversation spread quickly across tabloids and social media, dissecting angles, expressions, and the subtle shifts of a familiar face. In an industry that quietly worships youth, Simon eventually addressed the speculation himself, revealing that he had chosen to dissolve several facial fillers after realizing he had gone too far in his attempt to preserve a younger look. The admission was disarmingly candid. He acknowledged that in chasing quick cosmetic solutions, he had momentarily drifted from balance. What followed was not scandal but recalibration. He began focusing on health, nutrition, and overall wellness rather than surface-level adjustments. The transformation that unfolded afterward appeared less about aesthetics and more about intention. For someone who built a career evaluating others, confronting his own image publicly required a different kind of vulnerability. Aging within the spotlight of global television is a peculiar pressure, especially in an industry that monetizes appearance as much as talent. By openly discussing his decision to step back from cosmetic excess, Simon reframed the narrative. The conversation shifted from speculation to self-awareness, from ridicule to reflect. His journey became less about procedures and more about perspective. After years operating in a high-pressure environment where presentation often equaled power, he chose moderation over illusion. The shift suggested a broader acknowledgement that confidence cannot be manufactured indefinitely. Simon Cowell's story does not center on reinvention of identity, but on recalibration of priorities. In a culture that rewards relentless youthfulness, his decision to embrace a more natural evolution stands as a quiet statement. It underscores a truth rarely spoken in entertainment circles. Real authority is sustained not by resisting time at all costs, but by adapting with clarity, discipline, and an acceptance that change, when handled honestly, can become its own form of. After Simon Cowell faced the mirror and chose change. Tell me this, how much battery is left on your phone right now? Drop your percent in the comments. Elliot Page. There are moments in Hollywood when a young actor arrives and instantly alters the atmosphere. In 2007, with the release of Juno, Elliot Page delivered a performance so sharp and emotionally precise that it felt effortless, almost inevitable. The Oscar nomination that followed turned him into one of the most talked about talents of his generation. He wasn't loud nor manufactured for spectacle. He was thoughtful, intelligent, and quietly magnetic. The industry embraced him as a symbol of modern storytelling, and the public saw a rising star whose future seemed limitless. Success expanded quickly. Roles in major productions like Inception positioned him within blockbuster territory while preserving his reputation for depth. Red carpets, international press tours, and critical acclaim became routine. From the outside, his trajectory appeared smooth and controlled, the kind of career arc carefully designed by Hollywood itself. Yet behind the precision of interviews and the composure of public appearances, there were hints of strain. In later reflections, Page would speak about discomfort with how he was perceived, describing a growing dissonance between the person audiences applauded and the identity he privately understood. In December 2020, that private understanding became public. Elliot Page announced that he is transgender, sharing his truth in a statement that resonated worldwide. The response was immediate, both supportive and historic. The revelation did not dismantle his career, it reframed it. Instead of retreating from visibility, he stepped further into it, becoming one of the most recognizable transgender men in mainstream entertainment. His appearance on the cover of Time magazine in 2021 solidified that cultural shift, presenting him not as a controversy, but as a figure of clarity and resilience. Professionally, the transition unfolded with notable continuity. On Netflix's The Umbrella Academy, his character evolved into Victor Hargreaves, with the series integrating the change organically into its storyline. Rather than avoiding the subject, the show acknowledged it, reflecting an industry learning to adapt to authenticity. Page continued acting, producing and advocating, demonstrating that artistic credibility and personal truth need not exist in conflict. Elliot Page's journey illustrates a rare kind of courage within an industry built on image management. He had already secured critical acclaim and commercial success before revealing his identity, making the decision one rooted in alignment rather than ambition. By choosing transparency over comfort, he reshaped not only his public narrative but also the possibilities for others navigating similar paths. His legacy now carries two dimensions: a body of compelling performances and a lived example of self-determination in the most visible spotlight imaginable. If these stories left you speechless, don't just watch in silence. Hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next hidden chapter from behind Hollywood's brightest lights. The spotlight never tells the whole story, and we're just getting started, and we're just getting started. And we're just getting started. Simon Cowell. For decades, Simon Cowell has been the sharp silhouette behind the judge's table, the man whose raised eyebrow could launch or end a career in seconds. As the driving force behind global franchises like The X Factor and America's Got Talent, he built a reputation on precision, blunt honesty, and an almost surgical instinct for talent. His image was unmistakable: tailored shirts, controlled smirk, the embodiment of entertainment authority in its most polished form. But in recent years, it was not a critique of a contestant that captured headlines. It was his own reflection. Viewers began noticing dramatic changes in his appearance, prompting widespread speculation about cosmetic procedures. The conversation spread quickly across tabloids and social media, dissecting angles, expressions, and the subtle shifts of a familiar face. In an industry that quietly worships youth, Simon eventually addressed the speculation himself, revealing that he had chosen to dissolve several facial fillers after realizing he had gone too far in his attempt to preserve a younger look. The admission was disarmingly candid. He acknowledged that in chasing quick cosmetic solutions, he had momentarily drifted from balance. What followed was not scandal but recalibration. He began focusing on health, nutrition, and overall wellness rather than surface-level adjustments. The transformation that unfolded afterward appeared less about aesthetics and more about intention. For someone who built a career evaluating others, confronting his own image publicly required a different kind of vulnerability. Aging within the spotlight of global television is a peculiar pressure, especially in an industry that monetizes appearance as much as talent. By openly discussing his decision to step back from cosmetic excess, Simon reframed the narrative. The conversation shifted from speculation to self-awareness, from ridicule to reflect. His journey became less about procedures and more about perspective. After years operating in a high-pressure environment where presentation often equaled power, he chose moderation over illusion. The shift suggested a broader acknowledgement that confidence cannot be manufactured indefinitely. Simon Cowell's story does not center on reinvention of identity, but on recalibration of priorities. In a culture that rewards relentless youthfulness, his decision to embrace a more natural evolution stands as a quiet statement. It underscores a truth rarely spoken in entertainment circles: real authority is sustained not by resisting time at all costs, but by adapting with clarity, discipline, and an acceptance that change, when handled honestly, can become its own form of. After Simon Cowell faced the mirror and chose change. Tell me this: how much battery is left on your phone right now? Drop your % in the comments.